Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Andy Lopata. Andy is a specialist in professional relationships and networking for over 20 years. He was called one of Europe's leading business networking strategists by the Financial Times and a true master of networking by The Independent and Forbes.com. A very experienced international speaker, Andy is the author of 5 books. He has been quoted in a number of other business books and regularly quoted in the international press. Andy is a fellow and a board member of the Professional Speaking Association UK and Ireland, and a fellow of the Learning and Performance Institute, as well as a master of the Institute for Sales Management. He is also one of just 26 recipients of the PSA's top honor, the Award of Excellence. Please join me in welcoming Andy Lopata. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you're busy in the middle of your launch for your latest book, Just Ask, which I am so excited about. I love the title. But we're going to start in the earlier years. So Work from the Inside Out. It's all about all the different steps that we take, all the different trials and tribulations, the decisions, the twists, the turns, the pivot points that people make in their lives and their careers. And I'm sure, and I know that you've made many of those. So take us back as far as you want to go. I know it's been over 20 years at least. And tell us where you began and how that landed you where you are today.
Okay, so how far do we want to go back? In my 20s, I bounced from job to job. I'd left university early, partly because I wanted to be working in the record industry, and I found there were no openings for graduates. I was also struggling with an illness at the time, and it was just really impacting me. So the university allowed me to leave on medical leave, if you like, with a view to going back, which I never did.
What were you studying at the university?
I was studying political science.
And then you wanted to go in the record industry.
Yeah, so I mean, I was...
Are we talking music? Because I know that sometimes we interpret things differently. I know we think, just because we're in the US and you're in the UK, that English is the same English, and it's not.
No, it's not. No, we are talking about music. I'm a big, a big music fan, and I heard. I'm trying to remember what came first, but I think I can't remember how it came about, but I felt that that's what I wanted to do. I came from a background where the expectation was you'd be a lawyer or an accountant.
Aha.
And I know where it came from, actually. Yes, I've remembered now. So I chose accountancy. I worked for 2 summers while I assume what you would call your senior year in high school, the last 2 years before university. The summers I worked for a family member's accountancy firm in central London. And I was so bored. It just wasn't for me. And I thought, well, this is just because I'm lowest rung of the ladder. Sure. But I looked at what the partners were doing, and they were doing the same work that was boring me. But the bit that I enjoyed was a royalty audit for a record company. And I was in that record company for a couple of weeks, and I liked the environment, the atmosphere, the feel of it, and that's where that came in. But in the meantime, I'd been accepted at university for a degree in accountancy, but I could see that wasn't the future that I wanted for myself. So I changed. And back then, you could do any degree and walk into any job.
Oh, you could. Yeah.
By the time I left, you couldn't walk into any job with any degree. It had totally switched around. But yeah, I studied politics. But as I say, the combination of my health and also I'd had a careers interview halfway through my second year, and they said, "What do you want to go on to do?" And I said, "I want to work in the record industry." And the careers advisor just had this blank look on his face, and he looked. He said, "There's no openings. There's no graduate training schemes. There's nothing like that." And again, through a family connection, see how networking came in even before I knew what the word was.
Yeah.
But again, through a family connection, I got the chance for a job. And that I did a course on the music industry at City University in London at the same time. And I had the option to scout for London Records, which is quite a well-known independent record label here.
Yeah.
With a view to going into A&R, artist and repertoire, which is what I wanted to do. And two things happened. I think one, the job that I had was horrible. And I really
do you just wanted a foot in the door somewhere? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do in the record industry?
I don't think I did once I started that course, and I worked out that A&R was where I'd like to be, scouting bands. But I met the head of A&R from London Records on the course, and I said, "Look, how do I get into this?" So I went to see him. He said, "Look, you can start scouting for us, and here's the ladder, and here's where you start." But there was no real guidance on how to scout a band. So I was literally left, and this is in the days before the internet, in case you hadn't worked that out. So
you are talking about records now. We're talking
pre-digital,
pre all kinds of things, right?
Yeah. We did have CDs. We did have CDs at that time.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, the record industry is a term that still exists.
I didn't know how far back you were going. Yeah. Okay.
No, we're talking about 1990. Roughly around there.
All right.
We had two very popular music papers in the UK, NME, the New Musical Express, and Melody Maker. So what I would do is I'd pick up NME and Melody Maker, and they listed all of the gigs in London. And I would just go through, and I was thinking, well, what am I looking for? I'm looking for bands I haven't heard of, because obviously you're scouting unsigned acts. But you've got nothing else to go on, because by the time they're written about in the music press, then the record companies know about them anyway. How are you going to stand out as a scout? And looking through them, I was already disillusioned in the job I had. And I was looking through and I was saying, well, who haven't I heard of? Oh, look, Iggy Pop is playing. Oh, look, the Ramones are playing. I'd rather go and see Iggy Pop or the Ramones than take a chance on someone I never heard of and I don't know the backstory. No internet to do any research. So I went to see Iggy Pop and the Ramones instead. and I got a job as a civil servant. So in my 20s, I bounced around. And then when I was 29, my dad co-founded a business network. If you know BNI in the States, which is global, this was set up on those grounds. A friend of his from his golf club his son had applied to join BNI, couldn't get in because I think there was competition, and said, well, I'll set up a group for you, and then saw a business model there. My dad was looking for something, so he brought in him to help, and they co-founded it. And then, I remember at the time my dad talking about it, and we helped, we were talking about what the name would be and so forth. And he said, do you want to come and see what it's about? And I said, it's 7:00 in the morning, isn't it? And he said, yes. I said, good luck, Dad. I was running car parks at the time. I just bounced from job to job in my 20s because I had no real direction. I backpacked. I traveled around the world. I worked on film sets. I led an organisation, the finest golf clubs of the world, setting that up. Real mix, sound engineering, but I also ran car parks and was a tax collector. So real mix of jobs you'd love and jobs you'd hate.
So you're running through those very quickly, and I'm not going to ask you to list them all, but I am curious. There's such a range of things you're talking about: running car parks, sound engineering. What else did you name there?
Working on film sets, tax collector.
Tax collector. can you say a little bit about how you got your foot in the door for these different types of roles?
They were all jobs that came, none of them were ones that I looked for. They were all opportunities. So when I left the record company, I got a temp job, and then I just went to the job centre. The only time in my life I've ever been to the unemployment centre, job centre, and the civil service job was there. And it was just, that was probably the best job on offer. It was not my dream to be a civil servant, not to, put down civil service at all, but that wasn't what I was looking for, even though I'd studied politics. And then on my first day, my boss said, why are you in at this level? You're qualified for the next level up. And I'm so ambitious. I spent the next 2 years looking and applying for everything that was the next level up.
So you were a civil servant for several years? For
4 years, okay. 2 jobs, 2-year jobs. Then that job was so awful. I moved to Australia. I went off backpacking. I had been dating someone from Australia, and she went home because it didn't work out. I was so unhappy at work, and we got close again just before she went back. So I went backpacking. I went to LA and Hawaii, then spent 10 months in Australia, then went to South Africa for 3 months where I worked in the film sets. And then I came back from South Africa because my sister was getting married, and it was the European Football Championships, and I had tickets. I'm not saying which was the order of importance for me.
That's all right. But then again, you landed in South Africa because...
Oh, I had family there.
Okay.
So Australia was... Everyone went backpacking to Australia. At the time.
But you had a girlfriend there too.
Yeah. I mean, we'd split up by that stage, but we were close. But I also had a lot of friends. So it was a good 6-8 months before I saw her after getting there. I traveled around.
So the draw wasn't necessarily her directly.
It was probably the final. She was probably the final spur.
I understand.
And actually, the draw was as far away as possible from the job that had been sucking the life out of me for 2 years.
Yeah, I understand that feeling. I did something similar in my 20s. So you went to Australia. You were in LA. You were in Hawaii. You went to South Africa. You had family in South Africa.
Yeah.
How did you end up on a film set? It's not always that easy to get work on a film set.
My second cousin was a producer.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So basically, I stayed for 2 weeks with my mum's cousins in Johannesburg, and you'll notice a theme here because at the time, by coincidence, it was the African Cup of Nations, again, football or soccer, as you would ill-advisedly call it.
I apologize for all of America.
That's right. Every American podcast, I have to have a little dig about that. It's just
that's very okay. You can dig away at us. We've been... Anyway,
but yeah, so I wanted to stay in Joburg until the final, but where Johannesburg, where the football was taking place. But there was a job waiting for me on the film sets in Cape Town, and it was just wonderful. It was such a wonderful experience. It was advertising sets, so each shoot was only 3 or 4 days, so it was a lot of variety. And in a country like that, it's just the most amazing experience because you get to see parts of the city and the countryside that you wouldn't otherwise. We filmed on a farm out in Stellenbosch, which is a beautiful area. We filmed at the airport. I remember having my lunch sat by a hangar, by a runway. We filmed in the city centre, all these amazing places. And you got access.
It's interesting how you describe that job, let's say, that job, because you're describing the experience of being in these places. You've said nothing about the actual work itself,
which I loved.
You did. Okay.
I absolutely loved it. I mean, I've never been a physical labourer. When I was in Melbourne, I worked at the racetrack and I did function setup. So I'd move tables around and stuff like that.
You weren't just backpacking in Australia. You actually worked while you were there too.
I worked my way around. So I backpacked. Okay. I worked while I backpacked. I've worked in bars, but I've never really been a physical labourer. This is the hardest I've ever worked in my life physically on the film sets, and I loved it. I was doing it outdoors in the sunshine in a beautiful one of the most beautiful cities in the world, with, a really good group mentality amongst the team.
Yeah.
And, I was 25 years old, and, it's just, you look at pictures of me then, and I'm so relaxed and enjoying life. And apart from what I do now, it's the most enjoyable thing I've ever done.
Well, it's wonderful to be able to reflect back on that. And like, I can tell now our listeners don't know that, but we're on video and we can see each other, and I can see, how you're almost back there in the moment talking about it. And what I'm appreciating is that you can talk about that time and then say how much you enjoyed that as much as what you enjoy you're doing now. Because how often do we know people who've reached a much later juncture in their career, and they've gotten weighed heavily down with other responsibilities or other notions of what it means to be at another point in your career, and you take all these things on, and the joys or the pleasures of career sort of go out the window because you're so busy trying to achieve and succeed and all of that. So it's really wonderful to hear you say that. And also the background of all these different places you've been, all these different things you've done, I would think have also enabled you to say, yeah, I'm making a really clear choice about what I'm doing now. I've worked at a racetrack. I've been a civil servant. I've worked on a film set. I've done sound engineering. I've worked for a record company. I've done music scouting. I've done all these different things, and I choose to be where I am now. And I can imagine there are all kinds of other jobs mixed in there in your 20s we didn't even hear about, although I'm dying to hear. So I'm curious, of all those jobs that you did in your 20s, would you say that there's one that stands out as a favorite?
Oh, yeah. The film set work.
Yeah.
And it was the lowest grade work I did. I was the lowest of the low. I was the runner.
Yeah.
But I just loved it. And to be honest, the reason I got into the other stuff afterwards, the next job afterwards, was because my family didn't want me to move to Australia. So my sister got me a job and an offer before I could fly back out after her wedding and after the football. But I absolutely loved that. And as a lifestyle, I wouldn't change anything. So I love what I do now. I'm very proud of what I've achieved. And the difference that I've made, and hopefully with this book will make to people. But I remember meeting two German guys. I at the same time as working on the film sets, I was working in a backpackers hostel, running my own tours of Cape Town and just helping out. And I met these two German guys who came on my tour, and they turned out, as a pure coincidence, they turned out to work on film sets. And they were in between gigs, and their next gig, just as an offshoot, was a new film. And I think I've got this right. I have to check the years. But they had a film that they were going. It was a new pirate movie called Pirates of the Caribbean.
No way.
They were going off to work. They were either going off to work on it, or they had just worked on it. But they were telling me about their lifestyle. And I worked an evening job I had, or a part-time job I had for a long time before and after my backpacking years, was at the Royal Albert Hall, which would be my next favourite job, just a steward. But I loved that. And there was a guy.
What did you say you were?
I was a steward, so an usher.
Okay.
Yeah. But one of the guys I worked with there had a similar approach. So these German guys, they would work for 6 months on a film set. Now, when you work on a movie, even for adverts, for 3 days, it was like this. For a movie, it's 6 months, where they shoot for maybe 15 hours a day, because they want to get the light in the morning, they want to get the light in the evening.
Yes.
Particularly in the Southern Hemisphere. You eat 3 meals a day on set, and it's the most amazing food.
Yeah.
And so you have limited overheads. So basically their wages would go into a bank account and sit there. So they would work for 6 months on a film and travel for 6 months. And David, this guy I worked with at the Royal Albert Hall, he had 3 jobs. He worked as a steward at the Royal Albert Hall and usher. He was a baggage handler at the airport, and he did something else. And he did it for 6 months. And then the other 6 months he traveled. And, I don't think I was brought up very sort of career minded. And that's not necessarily a sustainable career for most people with, progression, but in your 20s, what a way to live. And actually, I could see that being a career model in something like the film industry, where you can work like mad for 6 months, and you can take 6 months off, but still progress through the different levels. So, as I say, I wouldn't change anything. Love what I do now, but if you said to me you could have your life all over again, the only thing you couldn't do is be a speaker and author, what would you do? I'd probably do that.
It's an interesting model. Work your tail off basically for 6 months. But the thing that you're describing is even the work that they were doing for, like, the two German guys you were mentioning. They were working for 6 months on a movie set, which can be really hard work. It can be grueling. Oh, yeah. You can work under. I've had some clients who work in the film industry, and I had one client who had to keep rescheduling her appointments with me because she had to go get on set during the right, lighting conditions to do car crash scenes and all kinds of things. So your life in a way is not your own when you work in that industry, because you really have to be available at their beck and call because of the things that you're mentioning. But at the same time, when you're in your 20s and your life is only your own at that point, for many people, you do have that ability to kind of flex and do that. And it's probably, for many people, the only time in their life they'll be able to do that, right? Unless, you want to be in your 20s for the rest of your life, which I guess we all know a few people who probably want to do that. Yeah. But it's an interesting model, and in some ways I almost would want to see some kids, maybe getting out of high school and go and do that instead of running off to university so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I traveled when I was 25, and I still believe that you appreciate it more with 4 years of junior miserable work under your belt. If you go straight from university, I don't think you can appreciate it to the same level. And you think life's just like that. I think it pays to experience some of the drudgery of life before you backpack and you experience that. I was interviewed, I remember being interviewed a number of years ago, about 15 years ago or more, by a guy called Mike Southern, who wrote The Beer Mat Entrepreneur, a very successful book here, and wrote for the Financial Times. And Mike, I can't remember how the question came up, but we were talking about the backpacking years. And I said that, in an ideal world, and we are far from an ideal world in terms of this being practical for 90% of people, but in an ideal world, we would all take a year off every decade and travel. And if that was a global culture where everyone took a year off every decade to travel, you wouldn't have the nationalism, the wars, everything that's happening now, because there would be so much better understanding around the world.
Oh, I love that image. I love the idea of what you're talking about. There's so much to be said for that, for sure. And I think it also lends itself well even to how we would take that back into our own communities, into our own lives, even how we feel about ourselves as individuals, right?
Completely. I've had that job. I mean, particularly the one I talked about, the one before I traveled. I've had that job that just sucks the soul out of you. And going back to your earlier comment about me being able to say, this is what I want to do, having had that experience and having been lucky enough to have experienced jobs that I've enjoyed more than once, I know how important it is to enjoy what you do. It doesn't mean you enjoy every minute. It doesn't mean you're stressed.
Right.
But the satisfaction, looking forward to a Monday morning, just little things like that, not getting, not counting the hours down till Friday at 5 o'clock or whatever it might be. Right. I do the hours I need to do. I don't work ridiculous hours. Occasionally I do.
Sure.
Particularly, with more and more work from the UK with the US with the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to work with the US because people are more open to remote speakers. Whereas when I come over, obviously logistically it's much tougher and a lot more expensive for the client. So I'm doing a lot more evenings than I normally would.
Yeah.
But generally I don't work silly hours because I choose not to. I make that choice. I don't work weekends unless I have to because I choose not to.
Right.
And I think it's so important to be able to be in a position to make those choices.
Right. So, I love this whole conversation. So out of your 20s, you had all these experiences. Your sister gets married. Somebody finds you a job or finds a way to keep you in the UK. Your family loves you so much, they don't want you to leave town again.
Yeah, I think they'd be quite happy now.
They're quite happy now?
Yeah, they'd be very happy for me. No, they wouldn't.
Well, no. I think it's lovely that they wanted you around,
Yeah.
And so what kind of a job did they lure you back with?
That was the sound recording. So because I was enjoying the film set so much and wanted to go back, my sister was working for a digital media agency. So they, not a digital media agency as we would see it now. It's very much at the very beginning of that. But part of what they did was they syndicated interviews to local radio stations. So I sound engineered those. I remember they put on PR events and they had a photographer there to get the pictures and get them out to the media. And they were using one of the early digital cameras that cost about £10,000. And I had to learn Photoshop in its, I think, very first iteration, one of its earliest iterations, and touch up those images. But the promise was that they were going to open a video editing suite and I would lead that. And that was the promise that kept me, and it never happened. But yeah, it had moments of great fun, but let's just say the boss and I didn't get on very well.
Oh, that's one of the main reasons why people leave a job is the boss. It's usually not the job, but so you came back from South Africa for your sister's wedding, but it sounds like you might have had a plan to go back to Australia. Was that?
I didn't really have a plan for anything. And this is, you asked about all the different jobs in my 20s. It's because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I loved Australia. I loved South Africa. Had a girlfriend in South Africa. I would have moved back to be with her, I think. And, if there had been ongoing work on the film sets, that really would have pulled me back. In some ways, I'm quite pleased. I love South Africa as a country, and I've got a lot of friends from South Africa. Back then in the mid-90s, a lot of people were leaving.
Yeah.
And, you have to read something into that. So I don't think I was thinking with my head at that point. Mm-hmm. Australia would have been a better bet. Mm. But this is before the internet and so forth. So for my family, that's why, Australia was a long way away back then, but I would have loved to have moved back. But as I say, no regrets, because I wouldn't be doing what I do now.
Right. So take us forward.
Well, I sort of jumped from job to job again until my dad co-founded the network.
I see.
Yeah. And then, as I said, he asked me if I wanted to see what it was about. It was 7:00 in the morning. I wished him good luck. 6 months later, I quit my job. This was when I was managing car parks, and it was an American car parking company. I was running a couple of contracts in the UK.
Do you remember the name of the car park company?
I do, but because of what I'm going to say, I'm not going to repeat it.
Okay.
I don't think that would be very diplomatic. Okay. But basically, I was running a couple of contracts. The contract that I was put onto last of all was one on the cheap. It was unworkable. The decisions made on the ground in the UK were dictated by the quarterly results on the New York Stock Exchange. and that's no way to run that type of business, and it was just impractical. So I felt like I'd been set up to be a fool guy, because this was just an unworkable contract. So I politely told them what I thought in my resignation letter, and left, and I was going to become a freelance writer. And at that point,
really? So were you already writing at that point, or?
Yes. So when I backpacked, I wrote letters home, actual letters that I photocopied and sent to various people, 5-6 pages of A4. And people have still kept them. Someone gave me like her mum's collection. She sent them on to her mum. They were like travel logs. And 20 years, what are we now? More than 20 years later, 25 years later, people have still got them, which is amazing. And then when I came back, I'd as you probably gathered, I'm a big football fan, and I'd previously written for a couple of fanzines. I think you have fanzine culture in the US as well, but fan-written magazines.
Yes.
I'd previously written for a couple for my club, and I founded my own. The guy that wrote the main independent fanzine went off to work for the club, and I said, well, you can't really be an independent voice if you're doing that. We need an independent voice. And I set up a fanzine, and that went on to be voted the top fanzine in the division, which was the one outside the Premier League at the time, in I think 1998, and then in 99, when we were in the Premier League, we were voted fanzine of the year in a national football league. I'd had the experience of writing about the travel. I'd had experience about writing about football. Some of my pieces have been in various fanzine compilations as well, books. So I wanted to be a writer, and I got business cards printed, and I said to my parents, "Now I'm going to do this." And I went to a couple of the breakfast meetings to start networking, and I now learned what networking was through my dad. And he said, "Come and help us while we set up the business." They had 4 groups at this stage. He said, "Come and give us a hand while you get some commissions." And I said, "That's a good idea." He said, "You're going to need some money till you get some commissions, so come and help us." I said, "Good idea. I'll get a pub job as well, part-time." And he said, "You won't have the time." I should have guessed what he had in mind then. And that was it. I just landed on my feet, and this was the place for me.
Wow.
The irony was I never became a freelance writer. I never used those business cards, but I went on to write 5 books and who knows how many blogs and articles. So I went there through a roundabout route.
So you worked with your dad?
Yes. Well, the business is still H&A Lopata Limited. His name was Harvey. He passed away in September.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. So I went and worked with him for 7 years in that business. Took a year to convince him to leave. I needed him to bring him with me for political reasons, shall we say. Couldn't leave him and his business partner in it together. And we set this business up together 12, 13, 14 years ago. And yeah, even right the way up to the end, he still, he still knew what was going on and still involved him in decisions and so on.
Wow. Good for him. That's great. So you're no longer involved in the business, is that right?
Not the networking business that he co-founded. We both sold our shares in that to our business partner 7 years later.
Yes.
And then via a stalled, very early social networking venture called Word of Mouse.
Word of Mouse?
Word of Mouse. The best thing about it was the name. The only good thing about it was the name. That's a long story in itself. But we had that stalled venture. But even with that, I'd already been while we were running the networking groups, I was going out and speaking and being paid to speak, and I was training our groups. So we then took that and developed that into a speaking and training business.
I see. So, so you were training other people to speak and write?
No. I was training them to network, and I was speaking about networking.
Okay, got it.
So when I say speaking and training, not so training and speaking, not training on speaking.
Speaking, you were speaking and you were providing training.
Yes.
Got it. And that's what you're doing today.
That and mentoring, yes, exactly.
So tell us more about that.
Well, it's the business has evolved over the years,
Sure.
and the work I do, I mainly work with large corporates, multinationals. I have a few individual clients that I mentor. But what I'll do is I'll keynote at conferences and do lunch and learns or training days for companies or retreats, beginning of the year kickoffs, that type of thing. But I'll also run programs in organizations where we'll start by presenting to a large group, then bring a smaller group into some activities together, and then end with a smaller group where I'm mentoring them and helping them embed the learning. And then we match that with some online learning and tools and journaling and so forth to really, it's all about not just giving them the information to forget,
right?
Helping them embed it so that they make it a habit.
I love that. Not just giving them the information to forget.
Oh. You have 3 stages of delivering information, and I'm fortunate in that I'm able to deliver all 3 stages. Stage 1 is to motivate people to want to do something differently. Yes. That's where a keynote talk comes in, or any type of presentation. You're not expecting people to make major changes through a presentation or to walk out of a presentation thinking, now I know what to do. They're walking out of a presentation thinking, I need to address this differently. I need to know more about this.
Right.
Then comes the training stage where you say, okay, you want to know what to do. Here's what you do.
Right.
And whatever form that takes, there's different forms it can take. And most people these days, even when they're motivated to make the change, they think they know what it is anyway. And many people have a lot of the basics within them. So what I'm trying to do, as a speaker who became a trainer, it's tempting to just chalk and talk, stand at the front and say, do this, do this, do this. What I've been trying to do over the last 2 years in particular is turn into a facilitator.
Yes.
Where I'm saying, share your experiences, share your perspectives.
Yes.
And now let me add my expertise and experience on top.
Right.
And then, so that's the learning element. And then you've got the embedding element. And that's where the mentoring and the additional resources come in. So you're holding people's hands while they take this new information and put it into action.
That is music to my ears, Andy. Music. And I can really appreciate the framework you just described, because I get calls from organizations on a regular basis asking me to come in and can you do a half-day training on communication? Mm-hmm. And I say, I could, but that's not going to change the way people are communicating in your organization if you think that's a fix. And so I won't do it unless they will couple it with some other pieces like what you're talking about the embedding and things like that. So I can really appreciate what you're saying about kind of having different stages or layers and levels of the way that you're going to offer information to people and then help them to really assimilate that and get it in their bones, so to speak. And
absolutely. It's simple, but we take too many shortcuts.
Yes.
Many of them are budgetary. Many of them are time now.
Right.
And commitment. But if you're not committed to learning and if you're not committed to change, you're not going to change anyway.
Right. That's right. So that's the speaking side, speaking and training side of the work you do. Tell us about your writing and your books and all the writing you've been doing over these past many years.
Yes, I've published 5 books now, 6 if you include a second edition of my second book. And it's interesting, someone pointed it out recently, but it sort of shows the journey that I've been on in terms of my career in this field, because the first book was about how to run business breakfast meetings, which is what we were doing. The second book was about how to work a room, using Susan Roan's famous phrase, but networking skills and presentation skills, which a colleague wrote. The third book was about referral strategy, so how to win business through the network that you've now built. And that's sort of been a lot of my work over the years. And then the 2 books that I've published this year reflect the change. All that stuff I still do, particularly the referral strategy stuff, not the networking group stuff, but particularly the referral strategy. But I'm focusing a lot more on working closely with leaders and professional relationships. So move away from this networking word, which can be misconceived as networking events
absolutely.
all the time.
Yeah.
So I've repositioned what I do around professional relationships. I brought out a book in the summer called Connected Leadership, which just looks at the role professional relationships have in executive success. And that's the title of my podcast as well, Connected Leadership, because it's such an important message. And it takes you away from events. They are part of the puzzle, but they're not the whole thing. It's much more about the different relationships you build from, all walks of life and in all through all channels over the course of your career. And then now with Just Ask, we're taking that much more into the personal space in terms of, are you struggling and how are you accessing help from other people when you're struggling? And yes, it is a business book, but it's also a self-development book. If there are chapters in there and there's a section in there that's written predominantly for leaders of organizations. And if that's not you and not your interest, you might skip that section.
Mm-hmm.
But it could easily be read, but it could be read by, an 18-year-old starting out on their journey and just feeling lost in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But they'd skip those chapters, and equally it could be read by a CEO of a big organization. And, any publisher, any marketer would say that's a terrible thing to say, because it's much better to hone your market. And I absolutely agree with that in many ways. But this book became something, that is important and is topical to so many people now in so many walks of life.
And I believe what you told me, and not to make this too trite, but this Just Ask book is really a passion project for you.
Oh, totally. Two things fed that. One is the recognition that my business was struggling when the project started, before I even knew it was a project. My business was struggling and I wasn't telling anyone. And I was turning up to meetings of the Professional Speaking Association, which is a community I've been part of for 17, 18 years and have some very close friendships there. And people were saying, how's business? And I was saying, it's great. And I thought, well, if I'm not opening up to this group, then who am I opening up to? And as someone who considers himself fairly open, if I'm not opening up, who is? So that was the start of it. And then on this journey, someone that I knew pretty well, a lovely, lovely guy, also talked on networking, passed away. And we found out that he had taken his own life. And it was over money trouble. And I'd been at his memorial service where everyone talked about how he always helped everyone else and never talked about himself. And there was a lot of love for him in that room. And there was a lot of wealth in that room. And no one knew the level of it. I won't sort of share the detail of what his wife shared with me, but she didn't know the level of it.
Yeah.
And that really sort of hit home. I've heard it this week where, the young son of, someone else from the same community has taken his own life. And, well, that's what I've read into the post. And this is happening too much.
Yeah.
So, it started out as a commitment to myself to change the way I was behaving, to turn my business around with the help of other people. And then when I had succeeded in doing that, because everyone likes a happy ending, to deliver the keynote talk at the Professional Speaking Association convention, urging everyone else to do the same, which I did. But with this Richard's passing along the way, and he had been a member of that community as well, so a number of people there knew him, that made it more emotional. The response to that talk was off the charts.
I bet.
I've been teaching networking and referrals for all these years. I wasn't used to people crying at my presentations, not for the right reasons anyway.
Right.
I think that turned into a passion project even more than it was. I think it was from almost the beginning. But seeing that the response and what people said to me and how that presentation touched them and changed their approach. I delivered it for a couple of groups for PayPal in Europe as well, and I got great response for them. So it showed that it resonated in the corporate banking space, which was important. But I knew I wasn't an expert at it. Didn't feel like an expert at it, and I could share my story and I could share the stories from the speaking world, but would that necessarily resonate elsewhere and be sustainable? So one of the best ways to really learn and become an expert in something is to write a book about it and to do the research you need in order to be able to write a decent book on the topic.
I love that.
And that's what I set out to do. That was the original purpose of the book, was to learn the topic.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you are reaching so many more people as a result.
That's the dream. That's the hope. You know, someone asked me earlier today, he said, do you make money from books? And the answer is directly, absolutely not. We'll make a direct loss on this book. Our royalties are pitiful, and that's not a comment on the publisher, by the way. That's just the nature of the game. The royalties are low, and we're going to give a percentage of those to a mental health charity in the UK anyway.
Nice.
There are indirect potential gains which far outweigh what royalties could be, because if books drive work, then you can earn more from the sale of one book in theory than you could, in work generated, than you could from selling 100,000 books. So there are indirect possibilities, but there are a number of other reasons to publish books.
Absolutely.
There is, from the selfish reasons, the commercial reasons, which protecting your IP, repositioning yourself in the market and helping people understand what you do and generating that indirect work, but also the non-commercial reasons, which is you've got something you care about that you want to share, and you want to help people who can't afford to bring you into their living room to deliver a keynote talk on the topic, or even have you mentor them on it. And actually, I wouldn't see myself as a mentor on this topic, because a mentor on this topic of this book is a counsellor. A clinical psychologist, depending on what the need is. That's not what I'm looking to do with this. And actually, the spin-off opportunities from this book are much more limited than my other work, because things might change, but I don't see this becoming a training program.
But I could see it being a component of a training program.
A component of a training program, more likely a keynote talk. I'm seeing it much more in those grounds. But I think once people need deeper support than that, my inclination would be to refer them on to someone more qualified than I am, because it's a dangerous ground.
What is the, I want to include this all in the show notes. What is the name of the organization that some of the proceeds are going to?
It's called My Black Dog.
My Black Dog.
Yeah, they're a UK-based charity who provide people who have gone through mental health issues and depression and issues like that to be on the phone and talk to those suffering now. So if you think Samaritans, which is a great organisation, which my niece volunteers for, Samaritans is great, but the counsellors there don't necessarily have to have gone through what people are going through. They're just there to talk and listen, and they're well trained to do so. My Black Dog is people who have been through it. I couldn't be an ambassador for them or a counsellor for them, because I have not suffered with those issues personally.
I see.
And that's their key area. But I came across them, and I always knew I wanted to point people to a resource that they could turn to, and B, it would be nice to support a charity with this book. And it just felt like the right fit, rather than a big charity everyone knows. I'm an ambassador and previously a trustee of a small charity in East London in the performing arts. And I know the importance for smaller charities of gaining profile and gaining funding when the big charities get all the attention.
Right.
And I thought it was important to shine the spotlight
I love that.
on one of the smaller ones.
Well, and I love the having my first career out of school was in the mental health field. So I can doubly appreciate this kind of an organization because it the fact that it's staffed by people who have been there, it's really good for them.
Yeah.
To be able to give back in that way. And it's really good for the people who reach out and need the help to talk to someone who's been there. You can't replace that.
Completely agree. It's founded, I interviewed the founder on Facebook last week. Last week when we were talking to mark the launch of the book and to introduce the charity, and she went through it. She's been through it. And that's why she founded the charity. And I think those personal stories are so important. And that ability to talk about what she went through and to support others through that, I'm sure is means a lot to her.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I feel like we could just go on and on here. There's so much richness in your story and in your career path, which is, complex and fascinating. Is there anything else that you're up to these days that you want to make sure our listeners are aware of?
Well, I think obviously Just Ask is a key message that we've talked about. I did touch on the other book that came out this year, Connected Leadership, and the podcast of the same name. Obviously, people listening to this are podcast listeners, and if you have room in your diaries for another podcast on top of your excellent one, then I'd love people to check out. We've had some amazing guests from the UK and the US predominantly. But what we're looking at is the role professional relationships play in success. And I've had a NASA space shuttle astronaut who was on the backup crew for Columbia and the mission afterwards. So fascinating conversation with Charlie. And I've had an Israeli orchestral conductor who studied under Leonard Bernstein about how you bring an orchestra along with you when you've got all these disparate talents with different thoughts and so on. I think leaders can get so much from. We've had the former CEO of Porsche and BMW. And that's just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
We only launched in September, but I'm so proud of the guests I've had and the conversation. So that's the Connected Leadership podcast.
I'm excited about that.
So yes, I'd love people to check that out as well.
Well, all the links to all your books, your website, everything will be in the show notes, and people will be able to reach out and touch you very, very easily. I'm so proud and so excited to have had you on the podcast today. So, Andy, thank you so much for being here.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me again.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Andy Lopata. It was so interesting to speak with him about his professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at www.tammygoolerloeb.com. Just look for episode 110. Are you thinking about what's next for you? Maybe you're feeling a little bit stuck. Get specialized group and individualized support, insights, and accountability from a brilliant mix of professional women in a safe, non-judgmental creative space. Join one of my small hybrid mastermind coaching groups starting on a rolling basis. You can learn more at https://bit.ly/navigating career change. If you were inspired by this episode with Andy, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd appreciate your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. I'd love to hear how it's going for you. Feel free to drop me a line. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.